for you briefly, and then I'm going to turn the stage right over to them. First, I have Mr. James Coker. Jim is the director of the Jefferson County Emergency Management Agency. He started that position in September of 2014 after a 35-year auspicious law enforcement career. Multiple things that he's done, including Alabama Incident Management Team member, graduate of the FBI Academy, advanced level emergency manager, and master exercise practitioner. So lots of good things going on there. Next we have Jody Hodge, Mr. Jody Hodge. Jody decided to pursue emergency management after 62 tornadoes ripped through Alabama on April 27th of 2011. And I know that a lot of us have those same emotional, we were engaged in something that occurred, and that's how we got into the field to start with. He enrolled following those tornadoes and the emergency management program at Jacksonville State University, graduated with a Master of Science in Emergency Management on Friday the 13th of 2013. He joined IAEM while he was still there as a student member, and he's been with us ever since, served as a secretary for the IAEM Global Student Council for 2 terms, and is with the county emergency management office there. And our third presenter is Mr. Michael Gaither. Michael comes to us today for an hour and a half only. This is the real part of our critical community partnerships. He drove in from Birmingham, Alabama in order to be here to speak to all of you, and he's leaving here because he's in a law academic program, and he's got school. He needs to go back and study and live his life. And so he's literally leaving after this session. Huge thanks to him for that kind of commitment to our organization, our profession, our professional improvement. So Mr. Gaither has served in the medical field for more than 25 years, received his associate degree in '92, started as a paramedic in East Central Alabama. He's currently the Director of Emergency Services at the new Grandview Medical Center, implementing multiple new programs, including improving wait times in the emergency department, triage programs, and moving the hospital, which is what this presentation is about, moving the hospital from its old campus, Trinity Medical Center, to the newly built Grandview Hospital. And with that, please join me in welcoming these gentlemen to our conference, and I will turn the stage over to them.
Very much. Okay, good afternoon. First of all, just so you know ahead of time, one thing that we in emergency management do, we always have a plan B, right? Anybody disagree with me? Okay, our plan B today, you'll see, but it'll appear seamless to you because my 2 videos in here are not auto-playing. So what I'm going to do, and again, this will be seamless, is while I'm running over here to make those videos play, Jody will discuss other aspects of the move. So you in the audience, you'll never notice this. You'll never know.
And I've got some, if anyone needs any legal questions answered, I can work on that too, so we can do family law, criminal law, domestic relations, or any of those issues I can maybe address.
Constitutional law?
I'd better not do those.
Okay,
So
all right.
I'm going to skip those.
Okay, September 2014, we were given an amazing opportunity because we were contacted by then Trinity Hospital to assist with the move of a hospital. This does not happen very often. It was also a fantastic opportunity for us to practice a mass casualty exercise. So the first part of my presentation will be to discuss the mass casualty exercise, but in this case, instead of moulaging students and interns, we have real patients. In some cases, very critical patients, but these are all real-world needs. This disturbs me greatly. This is an article that came out in USA Today back in May. If you notice, which state has the worst weather impacts in this country? We do. Alabama has the worst weather impacts. So this was an opportunity for us, again, to practice what we've already lived. We live in the red county right in the north central part of the state. That's Jefferson County. That county has more tornado impacts than any other county in the state. The 2 southern counties you see that are orange, Mobile and Baldwin counties, they have a lot of water spouts that are counted. We don't see very many water spouts in mountainous Jefferson County. If we do, I'm moving. I promise you. April 27th, this is also the event that drove Jody to go to graduate school. This is a tornado. It's over a mile wide. It is ripping the northern neighborhoods just north of Birmingham apart. A mile wide, just north of Birmingham. This, yes, sir.
And yeah, to add, one of the things that I find kind of interesting about this, and that was probably one of the largest tornadoes I think we've ever had in the state. It was my 4th day of employment at Trinity Medical Center as the Director of Emergency Services. I can't even describe for you, if you're from Alabama, there's a name that's synonymous to each of us, and that name is James Spann. James Spann is a weather personality that's been in Birmingham for a number of years. He's also our chairman of the hospital board. So one of the things that I never do wrong is a tornado drill, because we take it to a higher level than I can imagine anyone else would. And one of the things that is breathtaking, if you look at that picture, the amount of devastation that that has done and did is just unheard of. And that's very much why when we started working with Jim, we started talking about, this is real. We could have to evacuate a hospital. And I think in each of your worlds that you live in, the reality of having to evacuate a hospital is really, really close. Birmingham, and I'll hush, but Birmingham is a market. There's 13 hospitals in Jefferson County. A lot of those buildings are greatly aging in place, and they continue to age in place. And there's a chance not only from just an event, catastrophic as that may be, there are other reasons as to why you would have to evacuate a hospital. Gas, water, trucks that overturn on the interstate. There's a number of reasons behind that. So that's why we added that partnership together. And we learned, which I get a few slides at the end, but we learned so much that I really think we could do it if we had to without the prep and planning, because we had some lessons learned. And Jim and I, 24 hours that we didn't sleep before we actually put the first patient in the ambulance, there were moments along the way that I literally went home and told my wife, I don't know that this is going to work. Because we had some things, if we hadn't have drilled, we'd have done wrong. It's amazing how much, and people say, we got to do another drill. I'm so sick of doing drills. Without the 4 set drills we did, we would have screwed some things up along the way. And the difference was, that wasn't practice. That was for real. And we had 2 emergency rooms open, 2 hospitals open, and patients geographically moving from one place to the other till you completely vacated a hospital. So I still, in the ER, had patients showing up at an old hospital wanting to be seen. I had patients showing up at a new hospital wanting to be seen. So there's a lot of planning that we learned. And I think, we talk about this. This is something that applies to every one of us at some point or time throughout that. And I'll hush, Jim. I just wanted to, that tornado gets me all fired up.
That's a very important point. One thing that Mike brought up here. Mark, I looked at you and you messed me up here, buddy.
Well, Mark could bring it up too. If he
Mark Dembski was also there when this happened. Is the fact that during this hospital move, you had to run 2 parallel hospitals the entire time. Because you can't just turn one off and flip the switch and turn another one on.
Right.
So you had to draw one down and draw another one up.
You're right. And you don't realize the micro detail about the small stuff and how much it matters. And I'll paint you just one picture, and then I'll let Jim go through his slides with you like he should, because he's the expert, I'm a guest. When we loaded the first 10 patients in an ambulance, you have to decide, who are those 10 patients? What order do we put them in? Here's something that you don't necessarily think about. The first patients you load in a caravan of 10 ambulances, sitting in the caravan waiting on the other 9 patients to load, their clock started ticking the minute you loaded them. So the patient in the front has been sitting in that ambulance 35 minutes waiting on it to move, whereas the 10th patient has only been sitting in that ambulance 2 minutes when you get ready to move. So it's a real process of, we don't put the neonate that's getting tube feedings that's intubated first. You have to figure out what patients fit into those. You take those patients, and then you take those patients that are mentally ill, that are incarcerated, that are incapacitated, that are cuffed, that requires 2 deputies, and its own caravan. When you mix all that into it, it's a different game. Whereas there are patients that are stable. We had patients begging, please don't send me home, I want to move. This is so cool. I mean, it was just a process, a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing for a lot of people. But you have to think about the micro detail, which is what Jim talks about. That's what EMA did, was deal with the micro detail. So we, in instant command, could see every second of what was going on. We knew when the package went by Liberty Park. So we could make decisions in the command room, pushing them to load the next 6, 7, 8. Where's the patient? Where's the patient? Where's the patient? Push, push, push. All right, I'll shut up. That was my 18 words for the opening.
Going back to April 27th, a giant eraser across our landscape. A giant eraser. For me, this is very personal. The gentleman you see here was one of my high school classmates who did not survive the storm. I've been friends with him for nearly 40 years. He died trying to get a young mother and her 2 children to safety. None of them survived. In the big picture, if you look in the back, you see a lady in a red t-shirt with white hair, and a gentleman next to her. That's my wife's aunt and uncle. They lost everything they had. So it's not only professional, it's personal for most of us, because we've all lived through it or been touched by it in some aspect. Yesterday, you had a presentation about Joplin. Joplin was one of the driving forces behind us using this as a mass casualty hospital exercise, because we watched what happened to Joplin. And we decided we need to prepare here, because we do have 13 hospitals here. And we do live in a tornado alley. Christmas Day, this past Christmas. This was a surprise. We did not expect a tornado to drop out of a storm on Christmas Day. This presented a lot of challenges to us, because what happens on Christmas Day? How many people do you have working? Everybody's off. Everybody's somewhere else. You have relatives in from out of town who are not familiar with the area. This was a challenge. This really was a surprise. We had a very, very limited amount of time. You will hear us talk today about 2 types of software that we use. One is Everbridge, the other is WebEOC. In this case, 66,000 contacts were notified by Everbridge before the sirens went off in our county. That was really crucial to us. So we used both of these software types for the hospital move. Planning for our event took over a year. One thing the hospital did as they got close to the event is they were able to discharge everybody who could be discharged. So I think initially we were talking about moving 300 plus patients, and they were really able to whittle that down considerably.
We kind of took a lot. Our approach was pare down services that are elective. We pared down GI surgeries. We pared down anything that's plastics. We tried to push deliveries either up or back. We tried to move some cardiac specialty stuff in or out, the surgery schedule, all the elective cases, try to pare that down. But you know what? The thing that does for you, and I think this is hindsight after we talk about it, the one thing it does is, guess what it guarantees you is in the walls of your hospital? The sickest patients that you possibly could have are those that remain. Not those that are able to ambulate, usually able to walk somewhat. Those patients are the critically ill patients. We had a large amount of critical patients that we had to move. And the thing about us, I think, that's unique in this move, we're in the business of all medicine, which means we have a level 3 neonatal nursery. So we have the sickest of the babies. We have the sickest of the adults. We do all the service line medicine. We do neuro, we do trauma, we do surgical pieces, we do cardiac, we do the whole gamut of medicine. So the patients that we had to move were very challenging. We had one bariatric patient that weighed 686 pounds that we had to move. That was a challenge all to itself. Things that you don't plan for are those things that have to happen sometimes. So, but without a doubt, if I had to do it all over again, there's one thing that's the most important thing of my job, and that is this. You need to become friends or business relationships with your folks that are in fire and EMS and police if you're not. Because without the team of those ambulances and fire services and police officers, we would have never been successful. We could have never moved a patient without EMA, Jim's leadership, and the folks that are involved in the process itself. Jody organizing and orchestrating, EMA guiding that path, Birmingham Fire blocking traffic. Without those relationships, we would have not been successful. The Everbridge tool was huge to us. We used it internally inside. We knew when patients arrived, when they left. Every manager at our hospital, it's mandated that they get Everbridge and they're signed up for it and they get the notification from all the certain things because it's a good warning system. It provides us some intel, some upfront stuff that we need. But if you don't have strong relationships with the fire departments and the police officers and the EMS folks, then you will never be successful at this because once you raise the flag, it's got to happen a certain way. It can't be chaotic. And without EMA and a clear point of leadership, we had 300 people that wanted to be in charge, but we had one person in charge. Because if you have 300 people in charge, it doesn't work.
Sit down now. I had to pay him a lot of money to say that.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Now, you are here in the state of Georgia, right? How many of you know anything about Southeastern Conference football? Okay. This was one of our very first planning considerations right here, Alabama and Auburn football. Alabama's a football state. The new hospital, okay, I went to Alabama, my son went to Auburn. Got a brother-in-law that went to Georgia. We're trying to reach out and cover all of the SEC, except for Florida. He did great down there. He at Orange and Blue did okay. The funny thing is, the new hospital is on Highway 280. If you go further down Highway 280, you have Auburn University. If this was a game day, you couldn't get on 280 at all. Alabama had a game in Tuscaloosa that day. Crazy as it seems, football had to play an early part. This happened a year ago, last weekend. We had the first consideration was a football schedule. The second consideration was a little noisemaker that will happen this coming weekend that was right up the street. It's called NASCAR at Talladega. Okay? That was also a planning consideration. Grandview Hospital is the medical support for this NASCAR race. So we had to find a date, an open date, around NASCAR and around football. We found a date. I don't want you to read all this, but it did take 18 public agencies to move this hospital. These were local agencies, county agencies, municipal agencies, and state agencies, ranging from the state troopers to ALDOT, to the Birmingham Police and Fire Departments, to other police and fire departments, to ambulance companies, to the Department of Health. 18. We used the Alabama Incident Management Team to write the incident action plans for the move. Great practice for them, but again, it's a real-world mission. The Alabama IMT has been deployed around the country to large events, hurricanes, tornadoes, the station fire in Los Angeles. This is great practice again. Okay, this is part of the IEP, and this is also where you will see the seamless part because I'm going to zip out and start a video while Jody tells you about some other aspects.
Well, you know, when Mike was saying about the many details about the hospital move, when they actually came to us and had that first meeting, I sat there thinking, how can we play a part? But as the conversations continue to evolve and we continue to talk about all the many different aspects that I didn't know about from a hospital standpoint, and then they came and heard about all the things from an EMA and public safety standpoint. We had to work together. The relationship between EMA and Trinity Grandview, it was essential to make this as smooth. And as you saw, 18 public agencies were involved. The level of coordination and getting them together to operate seamlessly to make this move happen was phenomenal.
Okay, this video that you see, this is an animation. This was produced by a private contractor who was also involved with it. I've always wanted to ask Mike, but I never did. As you watch this video, you will see that the caregivers never actually touch the patients. So, Mike, I would say that your level of patient care was phenomenal with this. It's an animation, but it's a pretty good view of what actually happened. Now, you'll notice these caregivers are very impersonal. They have no faces. They have no hands. They have no feet. In some cases, they don't even touch the ground. So for all of you Star Trek fans in here, this is like teleportation. Come to life. It is. I'm going to use that. I like that. This video is HIPAA compliant. And I thought those were just traffic sounds. I guess not, huh? If you've ever been involved in a presidential visit, and you've been involved with a presidential motorcade, which the Secret Service calls a package, that was the basic model that we used here. We had a lead escort police vehicle. We had a trail escort police vehicle. We had 8 to 10 ambulances in between. And we had a Birmingham fire rescue truck also trailing in case one of the ambulances broke down or if one got in an accident, then there was an immediate backup. So this happened over and over and over throughout the day.
I've considered myself either the luckiest or the unluckiest man alive because we were also part of the presidential visit to Birmingham. So Jim and I spend an entire lot of time together doing things. So it is true. It's very, very distinct in how it happens.
A little over 9 miles. One of the planning considerations, that wasn't the shortest route, but this was the interstate route, and it was much easier for law enforcement to control it. If we had tried to go the shortest route, a lot of that was residential, and all we need is one kid on a bicycle or one dog or a squirrel or something like that to pop out.
So again, from that video, obviously that was just a rudimentary view of what happened, but it kind of gave us an idea of how this was really going to take place in the real world. The considerations, you saw the patients being moved. But now I want you to take a look at this picture, and Jim's really going to give you a good explanation of traffic in Birmingham.
Okay, you saw in the animation how smooth it was driving from one hospital to another. There's usually a little more traffic. Okay, this is not one of the peak times of day because this is at dusk. Peak times of day, Highway 280 just does not move. So we had to work with the state DOT a lot and the troopers to determine how do we best move these packages through without disrupting this major highway. And this is one of the worst highways, I guess, in the state as far as the traffic flow and traffic volume. So we decided not to stop the highway. But as the package came through, Birmingham police officers at the intersections would briefly pause traffic. The package would fly through. Traffic would then resume. Okay, exercises in a mock move. And Mike, please jump in here anywhere because this was your side of it. We did exercise and exercise and exercise. What is the first thing that always provides a problem to you? First thing, communications. One of our first things we found was radios worked in one hospital that didn't work in another hospital. So we had to go back and rewrite our plan and come up with a common type of radio system that would work in both areas. In addition to other communications devices, Everbridge notifications, During the actual move, everything that we did, we tracked using WebEOC. And we exercised, and we exercised, and we exercised.
And you've got to look at it from a hospital standpoint. One of the behind the scenes, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to go into this. You've got to remember most nurses don't ride in ambulances. So there was a lot of training that had to happen on how not to bump your head, what drugs are available, what drugs are we going to take in between the two trips. This is how this pump works. This is how this piece of equipment works. And there's a big difference in riding backwards if you've never rode backwards in an ambulance. That's a little different. So we had our first motion sickness. It was not with a patient, which was good news. So the nurse threw up, but it wasn't on anybody. So it was okay. So the point being is that there's a lot of small pieces in detail that you have to put in place to practice things like that. One of the things that Jim and them would do to us a lot is he would throw things at us when we would do the actual mock move. There would be a traffic intersection go bad that we couldn't use, or there would be a tornado, which was just the cruelest joke that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was a sunny day.
It wasn't me.
It was you. But I mean, just things in the move. We had a patient that coded while in a package. What do you do in that situation? Do you pull that patient out of the package, or do you leave them in the package with flow? There's all pieces. We tested an ambulance broke down. We tested an ambulance caught on fire. So we went through the whole gamut of anything that you could throw at us. That way, if something like that actually happened, then we knew what to do in that situation. You've got to understand from a training perspective, we had that element that we were facing, but we also had an element of I had a staff that was in the emergency department at one hospital getting patients empty and continuing to see patients at the old location while the other hospital, the Blue H sign, was being uncovered. So we had two sets of hospitals open at the same time with patients that were moving. So we had to pick people specifically for their job. You're the transport nurse. You're going to be in the ER Grandview. The communication thing was one of the big pieces that we struggled with. So that was something you guys were fortunate enough and able to work out. And what was staging? Another little piece that comes up. What if a patient codes while bringing them down from the elevator? What if they code halfway out of the parking lot? What if they code in the route? Where do you go? Well, who gives orders for those patients? So that's why the IMT plan was very specific. It was very much in a format that there left no question. You could flip to page 7 and it would explain to you what you needed to do, what was your protocol. So
I didn't want to forget this part, but Mike and I faced an unusual challenge that I absolutely did not expect, because your hospital does take patients that have mental issues that are there because they are court ordered. We had to meet with every probate judge in the state of Alabama. 67 counties, we had to have a meeting with every judge. Because in Alabama, the probate court retains possession of that patient the entirety of the move. So one thing we had to work out was an MOU between all of these probate judges so that their patients could be escorted by the sheriff's office in our county. Because there was no sense in having a sheriff's deputy come up from the coast to move a patient for 9 miles. We did have a couple of counties that elected to come in and escort them and move them. They were neighboring counties. But it was something that we hadn't anticipated, but interesting meeting. So this is the mock move. I think the Trinity and Grandview employees really enjoy this. I heard a lot of laughter that day. This was also a good time to test out everything from communications to patient tracking to supplies to transport. This particular slide is one of the neonatal mock move patients. This was a real concern for me, and I know it was as yours, both of you guys. The gentleman that you see standing up is a fire battalion chief. He was our communications guy. He serves on the Alabama IMT. He is very much a communications expert, and he was our go-to person. Okay, the real world event. This starts around 5 o'clock in the morning, as Mike said and Jody said. We did have 18 public agencies and groups involved with it, 3 ambulance companies, and hundreds of hospital employees. We had air support. We had eyes on everything. We also started a public relations, I guess about 30 days out, campaign to let the Birmingham people know, all the people in the county know what's going on October 10th.
Is anyone surprised there were people that did not know that morning that we were moving? There were still people out there in the community that had no idea.
One concern, because many of you have probably met some of these folks, if you saw a group of 10 ambulances going down the road and you had aluminum foil on your head, okay? Anybody of you know those folks? Does that mean that aliens have invaded Birmingham, Alabama?
They're here.
No, but not everybody got the word. We had a lot of media coverage. We had a lot of social media coverage, but not everybody got the word. But we wanted to make sure that, as to the best of our abilities, that the public knew. There was a lot of media interest in the move because you just don't see this every day. So the media was allowed to interview some hospital employees. They were able to interview some of the motorists on the highway. There was a lot of live coverage. This was the actual route. And like I said, this was not the shortest route, but this was the best route as determined by law enforcement with the least amount of problems because they can control this the best. Okay, Jody?
This is my favorite video because it gives you the good sense of what it really looked like.
Absolutely. And again, it touches back on the fact that there were 18 public agencies involved. One thing, too, that Jim didn't mention, I'll let you watch the video. What I was going to say is y'all saw on the slide before about the highway banner that said increased ambulance traffic. That was one of the partners working with the Department of Public Transportation to get access to the sign. So again, to make sure that no one with a tin hat thought we were having an alien invasion, was that folks that were driving, because again, you're talking about a move taking place in a very busy corridor of Birmingham. So it involved Interstate 20 and Interstate 459, which are two heavily trafficked areas. So making sure that they were aware of it. And one thing, what I was going to mention as well, is the importance of your public-private partnerships. And I'm not talking about just with us and the hospital too, but also with your wrecking companies, or towing companies, excuse me, because we actually had them placed as well, because again, 459 gets a lot of semi-traffic, which Mike had mentioned earlier about, what happens if there's an accident on the interstate. This way we had them deployed so they could respond quickly to get truck traffic that had stalled, had a flat tire, whatever, moved out of the way so we could continue to be uninterrupted on our patient move. And then also too, Alabama has in Jefferson County and some of the other counties around the state has a thing called ASAP, the Alabama Service and Assistance Patrol. What that is you've broken down, you have a flat tire, you've run out of gas, they'll come help you. So we actually had the State Department of Transportation put them on standby as well. So they were really there pre-deployed in certain positions so they could respond quickly if there was an incident on the interstate.
Communications. One thing that we decided to do early was use our amateur radio operators. Boy, did they get excited. They really got excited because this was a major event. We do use them heavily if we have something like a tornado strike. They're a key component to our overall plan in the county. So we had them pre-spaced around the county at different checkpoints, and as a package passed their checkpoint, they would radio that in to our EOC. It would then be put into web EOC as part of the official record, and the hospital would be notified. So at any given moment, we knew exactly where every single patient package was along the route. The last thing we wanted to do was lose track of a patient. We couldn't do that. The Birmingham Police Escort Leader would also radio in when they would pass a checkpoint. But the amateur radio guys were usually about 20 seconds quicker because the cops were driving. You know, they're trying to look in the rearview mirror. The amateur radio guys were fantastic. Next time I have to move a hospital, we're going to use them again.
I hope I'm practicing law.
This was something new to us. We had just gone from a previous warning system to Everbridge, and part of what we had bought was what was then Nixle, it's now community engagement. So we established a keyword, Grandview. Most of the employees at the hospital had come up on it. We also allowed the public to come up on the keyword. So as soon as a package left Trinity Hospital, the old hospital, we sent out notification. And we started timing this because we were new to the keyword concept and use. It took 13 seconds from the time we hit enter until the time that the employees at the receiving hospital got the word. So they knew in 17 or 18 minutes, you're going to have another group of critically ill patients arrive. We kept this up all day. So again, early in the morning, you see some of the traffic here.
Jody.
We had planned for this to end around 6 p.m. We ordered lunch that day. This was finished at noon. 6 hours earlier than we thought. We had to wait around for lunch to be delivered because we'd already paid for it, so we couldn't just walk off.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
We're going to eat it.
Yeah, we were going to eat. That speaks to the professionalism of everybody involved, all of the 18 partnership agencies, the private agencies, the private partnerships, the staff at both hospitals. It's why you practice. It's why you practice. It's why you exercise. Okay, Mike?
All right, I'm going to go quick because I think we're on quick time. I got this little thing on. So just a couple thoughts, and I think it's probably the most important in all this process, is there are two ways to look at this. There is the systemic way in which we did it, which is planned, organized, moment to moment, and concise. There is also another way to look at it, which there is no time to plan. You've got to evacuate a hospital. So I'm going to talk to you in two different terms. I'm going to talk to you on what Jim taught us when you talk about EMA and when you talk about the move as a perspective, and then how would you approach or skin this cat. You can tell I'm from Alabama. I still use the word skin that cat. Sorry, I don't mean to skin a cat for real, but that's just a word we use. If you look at the slide set when we talk about, do you mind flipping the next one? What we did is we color-coded each area of the hospital. So you really can't see specifically the slides, but what we said is there's a red area, there is a yellow area, there's a pink area, there's a blue area, there's a hot truck, those type things. So we said high risk is your reds, and we had pink, which is your babies, and then we had some different color coding in each one of those. Because here's what you get into when you start moving patients. You almost have to empty a floor and reconcile it. Because if you don't empty that floor and you reconcile it, you lose somebody. At the end of the drill, we had hunted one patient. This was the most perfect drill. If I'd have wrote it and scripted it and we'd have done it again tomorrow, we couldn't do it better than we did when we moved. But if you move it, vacate a floor completely. We tried a rotational system in the beginning, red patient, yellow patient, green patient, red patient, and you get lost in that. Because what happens is you've got a really sick baby in the front, and then you've got somebody in the back that's got diabetes. So you've got to try to figure out by your units. So what we did is made separate moves. There was the baby move. There was the mama move. There was the sick baby move. So there was a well baby move and a sick baby move. If you pod that together, we had a group, Jim and them had babies was moving on their own plane. we'd drop a baby when it was loaded into that package of 10. That way we didn't have a wait or a delay. So there is a science to this, and it took us a long time to figure out what works, but you've got to look at what you've got to play with, and you've got to look at how you're going to split those patients to where it fits into a category that makes sense for you. Ultimately, it takes longer to move a patient that is unstable outside. So you're moving an unstable patient from the SICU. 2 packages may have gone by before you get that unstable patient into that rotation. But what you do is you keep those ambulances full and you keep them moving. And we had eyes on the front ambulance, eyes on the back ambulance. In the instant command, we were going 2nd ambulance loaded. 3rd ambulance, where are you? 3rd patient, SICU. Are you close? SICU. It was a matter of you had to play it on the, you couldn't lay, and you know how you learn in the real world, it's, all right, everyone, you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, you're 5. When you move a hospital, it was, hey, y'all, 8's ready. 8, line them up. 6 is ready, 6, line them up. A baby, no, you're over here. Then you can make that work. That's the only way to make it work. So that's the same concept here is how it wound up happening. 2 patients, 2 patients, 2 patients, and you split those patients into rotations. And at the end of it, you go 98 patients, everything balances, we're clear. And then look at what your midpoint was, and then you're able to do it. So that's
Hey,
the
Mike,
way.
let me interject one thing.
No, please.
We used WebOC to track. We also used an Excel spreadsheet to track based on the reports from the amateur radio operators. And how many of you remember T-cards? Okay, we used T-cards also because this entire thing was an exercise for us.
Right.
So it was technology's working down to T-cards because technology is not working.
And
we practiced everything.
And you're exactly right, because I'm old, and it's okay to be old. And I'm glad I'm old. I wish I didn't lose hair right here, but other than that, I'm happy. Does any of you know what this is? This is an ink pen. Some people aren't familiar with them. They have those cool little boxes. It's got an apple on the back of it. You know, all those computers. We had a vendor, a friend, who had this elaborate software. This software would track the Hubble telescope and all these things you'd need, and you'd barcode scan patients, and it would pop them up on the computer, and all this fanciness and all this stuff in the world. Go ahead and flip that slide. Just let me show you the most important slide. Keep going, Jody, I'm sorry. That right there. That's my favorite slide. You have to use your brain, and you have to have the ability to think outside the box and use a pen. In the instant command, we had T-cards, which Jim pulled out. We had a big board that we would mark patients off. We had the greatest software on earth. It would scan a patient, you would know where they were, we'd load them into the ambulance. But when that software failed, guess what happened? We had no backup if we didn't go to the old-fashioned, which is use the manual process. If you're moving a hospital, not like us, just because we built a new one, and we were cool and happy and had new T-shirts and a new logo and cake waiting on us, if you're moving a hospital today, you know why you're moving it? Because something bad's happened. You may not have power. You may not have water. You may not have the resources that you need to have elaborate computer systems. That's why fail-safe mechanisms like the T-cards and the ability to look at the basic premise and how to actually physically do things without a system to make sure that it works. Because that's the most important part, is that you get every patient out safely, that you get every patient accounted for, that you know where every patient is at every time, that you don't delay. Because not only were we moving those, like Jim said, there were some folks that were criminally insane. that didn't need to be intermingled with the regular patient population. Their needs were just as important as everybody else's, but they didn't need to be intermingled. So that was the whole point. If you go to the last one, that's really the last thing is just from a campus perspective, and then I skipped 2 slides on the move itself. It is not every day that you get a chance to move a hospital. We are very fortunate to have been with Jim and his team at EMA. We in Birmingham, we in the state of Alabama, learned a tremendous amount from moving one. And we've been asked many different times, how do you do it, and how would you do this, and how would you do that? So we've told this story quite a lot. It's very much just establishing an instant command and establishing the parameters using a recipe that we put in place of just making sure that everyone's accounted for and moving your most critical. You don't have to move patients in any certain order. You don't have to move them in any certain framework. You just have to be able to account for every patient and make sure that they're safely managed and safely moved. There's a lot of training that goes behind the scenes, and I go back to what I started with when I so rudely interrupted you during the tornado slide. Drills, and I guess there's too much Army left in me, and I can't help that. You practice it. You may never use it, but you practice it. And some people don't take that seriously, and that drives me crazy. We would have never been successful moving 100+ patients through Birmingham, opening one hospital, closing another hospital while both hospitals remained open, and had a group of nurses at a racetrack at the same time if we had not practiced. Because as I told Jim the night we went home, as we sit there alone, going, is it morning yet? There was a lot of things that we had to do different. And there were a lot of things we had to do right. We had originally put what we called a hot truck, which is a truck that's going to carry all your critical supplies that was going to follow the ambulance with anything that you needed. You ever seen a U-Haul going lights and siren? It don't work real well. We learned, no. U-Haul truck, you stay here. So there was things that we learned along the way that helped us clear it up. I hope you never have to move one. I think it was the coolest thing I've ever done. It happened last Monday a year ago. It will be a part etched in my career for the rest of my life. Got me Manager of the Year. I didn't get a gift or money, but I got my picture made. So, but it was fun. I mean, we enjoyed it. We learned a lot. So apply some of these principles. If you ever have something like this happen, we're more than glad. We're a phone call away, and we'll be glad to answer anything. Jody, do you have any other comments you wanted to add? That's kind of, and I skipped my slide. And, oh yeah, I forgot. I should mention that. That was one of the floors while we were moving too. We forgot we were still doing construction too, so in the middle of all that. We didn't go in that door though.
Being a student, because, and I think what Mike was saying earlier about, we're so used to having everything on our phones and a tablet. And the fact that Jim had the foresight to put together redundancy on top of redundancy. Mm-hmm. You mentioned it about your software vendor. We had the redundancy to track the patients with the amateur radio. We had the T-card system. Yes, we were using WebEOC, but we also used an Excel spreadsheet as well. So it was just a redundancy built on top of a redundancy, because this was incredibly important. You've got patients to move, and like you said, you can't lose one. You had to make sure they left and all arrived. So.
And again, there is nothing wrong with counting on technology. Don't get me wrong. All my nurses and every physician that works in our hospital count on technology, and they count on it every day. But if you don't have a backup to that technology, that's where you run into problems. And the system that the gentleman brought, the vendor software, was one of the most amazing tools I'd ever seen in my life. It would absolutely give you real-time data, diagnosis, condition, mapping. It'd give you everything you needed. But if you don't have a plan that you can abandon it, you should see my ER staff when the computers go down. Hey, it'll be up in just a minute. No, it won't. It's okay. Everybody grab a pen. So the redundancies are the key. Because if you don't have them, that's where you get into a jam. Any other questions? Did you guys want to ask questions? Or do you mind if... I am half deaf, so we'll have to go to the interpreter group here. And I admit that.
George Gilbert. Did the new hospital come with its own equipment tail, or did you have to move any critical pieces of equipment?
You know, the answer to that, this is going to be a lawyer answer. It depends. 90% of the equipment that we needed at Grandview was in place, with the exception of a few rollables. We got, because it was a new facility, Grandview, Montclair was a very old facility. So for the last year, we didn't do any capital improvement. A lot of that equipment, so the MRIs, the CTs, the surgical equipment, the big cost items were already there. New stuff. And then they took the stuff that was at our hospital and recapitalized it back into that CHS hospital family that we had. So there was a lot of scavenger of the stuff we had. We were already set up gauze, 4x4, dressings, and etc. when we moved.
You probably had to train your staff on that new equipment.
Yes, we did. And that was another set of harmony that was kind of going on behind the scenes. We would have, each department head or manager would be responsible for making sure their own people knew where everything was. We had, in the meantime, while moving this equipment, was behind the scenes setting up gauze and bandages and stuff. It still was challenging though, because it's hard to practice if you've never been there. And I'll give you a great example. The morning we opened at 6 o'clock, I was in Incident Command, he was over in the EMA. I had 5 patients tailgating in the ER lobby at the new hospital waiting to be seen because they want to be first. And you know, it was the little things like that. And I had 10 nurses on duty that had a tour. And they're walking around for the first hour going, hey, you know where the gauze is? I mean, we told them, but it was still hard. It was really hard at first. The first 30 minutes, first hour, it got that. You know what our biggest moment was? Getting everything to print where it was supposed to. That was the biggest thing. Has anybody seen Susie's prescription? Have you got it? I mean, so those kind of things. So there was big common items. There was a hot truck, but hot truck typically only brought the infant warmer, the rolling x-ray equipment. Most of that stuff was already there. Then they scavenged. Ma'am, you had a question back?
Just go right to the pen.
Me personally, I have my answer, but do you want to?
Unplanned, no. This fancy software was a private vendor, thank you, the private vendor that was retained for this event. So if we had an unplanned event like happened in Joplin or our next door neighbor, Tuscaloosa County, April 27th tornado came within a quarter of a mile of that hospital. You don't have time to go find a vendor with software. So we would resort to everything else that we have in place that we can immediately roll out. Yes, sir.
And let me add to that before you finish, just to kind of go with where he's at. I'm a medic. I'm a nurse.
Nice.
My medic in me, I'm going to call the fire EMS folks and say they're going to come to the scene and establish instant command, and they're going to move it in that fashion. Because it's an incident at that point. So the plan can be the same together. So what I described to you, you've got that relationship, you were able to pull it. Because here's something most people don't think about that was one of our bigger holders that day. We had to have, Jim and I and Jody needed a bucket of ambulances. And we knew we needed 30 plus ambulances that day. We also knew that Walker County needed ambulances. Jefferson County needed their regular trucks. So you had to pull ambulances in. If I raise the flag and say move a hospital, we're going to have to pull out from resources because those calls are still, counties are still going to have to deal with 911 too, because 911 takes the priority in that. Hospitals have a 96-hour plan that Joint Commission requires us to do. And I know you probably saw this with all the stuff that was recently on the news. We had to drop beds and disaster stuff in, but what Joint Commission says, and I can't believe I'm referencing Joint Commission. I can't believe I just read. I'm sorry, I'm worried about me right now. Yeah, okay, maybe it's better. They say in a natural disaster, something bad happens to you, X hospital. You must have a 96-hour sustainability plan that you're able to sustain for 96 hours before you consider evacuation. The exception to that is I've got to evacuate a hospital because a tornado or a hurricane is coming. Hurricane example, my boss, which is a good friend of both Jim and I, Andy Romine, was the CNO, Chief Nursing Officer at Trinity Grandview when we moved. He took a promotion and he is in a hospital in Florida called Wusthof, which is right there on the coast where the hurricane came. He called me and he said, Gaither, man, they're going to make me evacuate. What do? I say, Andy, don't worry about it. Do the same thing you did with this one. Drink coffee and walk around. It'll be fine. All right. Then you, sir, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, man. Look at you. Isolation, you and I need to just, let me give you my card. Isolation is its own unique parameter. We were able to manage that as a separate wing by only potting isolation into groups and have an isolation package, where that last package that we sent was the isolation patients. That way the ambulances didn't go out of service. That's how we managed that. The safety piece, I'd love to give you my card.
Mine was really just a tag on to the previous conversation. I actually just did an emergent decompression of a hospital this week as part of Hurricane Matthew. And so I will tell you that we did not have time for technology. It was totally pen and paper, making sure that myself as the evacuation coordinator had somebody with me to take the notes and to keep track of the patient, making sure that we had people in the right places. So technology at that point, when it's an emergent event, we had no power, no water in the facility. Totally, you have to go hard copy, pen and paper.
You do, and I'm glad you said that, because we can sit here and tell you in a perfect situation how to move one. However, what Jim did is added all those variables into that perfect situation, so we had an applicable plan that if something like this happened, here's our lessons and what we learned. So I think so I'm glad you added that. That's a great.
And one last comment. This was a planned move based on unplanned events that we'd seen before,
Correct.
like you just went through.